The pawn of prophecy is a reluctant foot soldier in the war of the gods. The power of magic is growing. But just who is the Queen of Sorcery? Hello and welcome to the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to be looking at Book 2 of the Belgariad series by David Eddings, and Book 2 is the Queen of Prophecy. No, the Queen of Sorcery, because, the reason why I got confused there, Book 1 is the Pawn of Prophecy. Yes. Now we have done a review of that, so you can check that out. These reviews are not going to be spoilers. There's no spoilers in these because I kind of like to discover books without any spoilers, and I'm assuming a lot of people do too. And talking of two, Book 2 is this one. As I say, it's Queen of Sorcery, and strangely enough, it was published the same year as Book 1, 1982. It was 6 months in between, so I guess he'd written both of these, presumably one after the other, and so he had this one all ready to go. Well, let's just find out what Garion and his friends are up to. Queen of Sorcery, Book 2. Well, what's all that about? Well, I'll just give you the general setup so far. Basically, in Book 1, you have a prologue that tells you all about the War of the Gods. There's this huge battle that happens, various things happen. As I say, I'm not going to spoil this, but it's all set in ancient times. It's basically the beginning of the world. And there is a big, powerful orb called the Orb of Aldur. And let's put it this way, that's the battle that everybody's fighting for. All the gods are trying to claim this orb. One of the gods is a bit evil. He's called Torak, and he wants this orb for himself. He wants to gain control and power over all the other gods. And he does a pretty good job of trying to get it, but he doesn't succeed. He gets banished or killed, we're not quite sure. He just disappears. And so that's sort of the big picture backdrop to the whole series. And then fast forward maybe about 1,000 years, again it's just a lot of time has passed. We meet a young farm boy called Garion, and he is working on this farm. He's an orphan, and he's being looked after by his Aunt Pol, who is the chef. She's the cook at the farm, and she's quite a stern lady, and but she's looking out for him. She's one of these warm but stern characters. And occasionally there's another character that crops up. His name is Wolf, and he's a storyteller. He's a vagabond. He comes along every now and again. He's got a little twinkle in his eye. And Garion and Wolf really do bond. They bond together. And those are the three main characters. Now, as you can probably guess, and it's on the blurb anyway at the back of the book, they do get involved in the quest for this orb, because the orb was protected. It was being looked after by a king. Unfortunately, it was stolen, and things are stirring. There are rumours that Torak is returning, so there's an impending threat, and people think, wow, he must be after this orb. Maybe he is the one that stole it, or has asked for it to be stolen, so he can maybe come back into the world. And that is the setup. And Book 2 does exactly the same. You get a little bit more about the War of the Gods, so there's a bit more detail at the beginning of the book. And the book pretty much picks up where Book 1 left. So obviously they're searching for this orb. And again, I don't want to give any spoilers away. So Book 2 carries on the journey. And because there's 5 books, you kind of know that they're not going to find the orb in the first book, so that's not a spoiler. So they're continuing to look for the orb. And there's various different themes that occur through this book which are different from the previous book, one of which is friendship, but more specifically the new friendship. Because Garion is growing up, this is a coming-of-age story, and I remember when I was about 14 or 15, friendships are very fragile. They're very curious things, because you want to be liked, you want to create friends, but then you're a bit awkward, maybe you're a bit shy. So how do you go about friendship? So when you do meet somebody that you admire or you look up to, then it's forging that friendship, hopefully in a non-cringy sort of way. And he meets this master archer, and he befriends this archer, and it's one of those things where if you're that sort of age, you're keen, you're enthusiastic, you kind of really want this friendship to last, and David Eddings does a really good job of exploring that kind of naive friendship, because sometimes people aren't always who they appear to be, and people let you down, and then is a bit of a shock if a friend, certainly a friend, it's like, why would you let me down? We're friends, how could you do this? So there's that theme that runs through certainly the early part of the book, and that actually adds to Garion's characterization and his story arc and his characterization arc. There's also the theme of political intrigue, and it carries on. This one actually does carry on from book one, because they're searching for the orb, they're going through various different countries. Each country has its own political backdrop. So there's a sort of middle story that you discover throughout all of the lands as they go through country to country. And it's really interesting the way that the author explores political aspects, but through sort of characters that you meet. And, you can have friends who are kind of on the political opposites. So again, it's like testing your friendship through bigger means. So the world isn't just about you and what you're doing. There's also a bigger picture about what society is doing as well. And also that feeling of being out of control. Certainly some of these countries have a kingship or a queenship. And, if you live in that type of system, well, unless you're high up, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of power. So that's an interesting concept to explore as well. And then also, I would say one of the main themes that runs through this is revenge. Garion is an orphan, and we discover a little bit about where he's from and what his ideas and what his feelings are about being an orphan in the first book, but they start to be explored a bit further in this book. And Aunt Pol hasn't really told him much about his heritage, where he's from and who his parents are. And it's mainly to protect him. That's her reasoning anyway. Garion, obviously, he's growing up. He wants to know where he's from and who his parents are. And unfortunately, it does lead to a sort of revenge characteristic taking hold of him. And it's a really interesting concept of when revenge takes hold of you, what will you do? Or what wouldn't you do? That there's decisions to be made when you find certain information out. So overall, I really thought this book was good, and it's one of those tricky things with a book two of a trilogy or a series of books, because it's where do you go from here? Book one, you're really trying to set the foundations for the series. You're really trying to explore and create your world and create your characters. And book one does a really good job of setting all of that up. I fell in love with every character, even the villains, which is always a good thing. And I cared for each character. And book two, I wanted to know more about them, and that's what it does. It delivers it beautifully. It doesn't do anything flashy. It doesn't try to, do something that's a shock horror tactic or an amazing twist just to grab your attention. It doesn't do that. It doesn't cheapen itself. What it does do is it carries on the story as you want it to carry on. And there are certain Lord of the Rings parallels that keep cropping up. I'm not the first person to notice this, obviously. And I knew that was the case. So when I read this, it's like, I can see where and why people have said that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not an imitation of Lord of the Rings by any means, but you can see the influences. And like the second book in Lord of the Rings, it's you want the journey to continue. You want the perils to be there for the characters to overcome. And that's exactly what David Eddings does. There are some really nice set pieces in this book that don't feel contrived. They feel very natural when the characters meet them. And there is a big, it's a personal big finale, big set piece. It's not necessarily one of the bigger pictures. It's not necessarily a big battle or anything. It's a more personal final scene, if you like, that's really kind of moving. And what it does do, and I think the second book has to do this, you have to then push forward and set up the third book, and you want the reader to then want to read the third book straight away, which is exactly what this book does. So I am thoroughly enjoying this series, and I'm going to be looking forward to reading book 3 very, very soon. So Queen of Sorcery, yes, David Eddings is still giving the goods to this series. It's really, really good. Check it out. Thank you so much for watching. That was book 2, Queen of Sorcery of the I said it perfectly off camera. The Belgariad. There we go. That's another name that I can't say very easily. Oh dear. But David Eddings I can. So there we are. That's Queen of Sorcery. It's book 2. There's 5 in the series. I'm looking forward to book 3, which is Magician's Gambit. That hopefully will be coming up very soon. Remember, we do have the review of book 1 that's already there on our channel, and we've got lots of other fantasy book reviews and board game reviews and film reviews as well. Thank you so much for watching. Check out our website, which is thebottledimp.com. Plus we have a Facebook page and Twitter. Until the next time, bye!